The Volon ship came out of the darkness like a knife, beautiful in a terrible way, with silver scales covering its hull and weapons that glowed with soft blue light. 3 kilometers of predatory grace, it moved through space with the confidence of an apex hunter that had never known fear. Inside, Overseer Maltic stood before a massive window and watched the small blue planet below. New Bison. The humans called it that, those 400,000 strange, soft creatures clinging to existence at the edge of known space. Maltic had studied humans before this assignment. They were young, weak, and foolish, barely 2 centuries into interstellar travel. The Valeran Dominion had ruled this sector for 3,000 years. This would be effortless. Maltic's scales shifted from silver to deep purple, a sign of satisfaction among his people. Send the standard message, he commanded his communication officer. Give them 72 hours. Down on the planet below, in his modest office overlooking the capital city, Ambassador Taiho read the message with steady hands. At 63 years old, with gray threading through his hair and tired eyes that had witnessed too much, he carried the weight of a soldier who had chosen a different battlefield. 30 years in the United Earth Navy. The First Contact Wars, when the Qatari Empire's fires consumed 3 human worlds before anyone could mount an effective response. He had lost his wife in those flames, along with millions of others. Now he spent his days negotiating with aliens and drinking tea, a far quieter life than he had anticipated, though no less consequential. When his aide Yuna entered, barely suppressing her alarm, Taiho already knew. The young woman had been assigned to him 2 years ago, fresh from military intelligence, carrying the sharp eyes and quicker hands of someone trained to see threats before they fully manifested. She had never smiled, not once in 2 years, but Taiho had come to respect her deeply. The Valoran Dominion, he said quietly after reading her report. The message was brutally straightforward: complete surrender of all resources, all territory, all people. Refusal meant orbital bombardment, the complete annihilation of New Bison from space. He set down the datapad and picked up his tea, taking a measured sip while watching the sun set over the capital city. Beneath that sky, 400,000 people lived their lives. Families with children, retirees seeking peace, young couples building futures that these monsters wanted to erase. How many ships? He asked. 1. A diplomatic vessel. But Admiral Ju's intelligence reports it carries enough firepower to level every city on this world without effort. Taiho smiled, a dangerous expression, the kind worn by old soldiers remembering what their species could accomplish when properly motivated. They send 1 ship because they believe 1 is sufficient. They think we will cower. He rose and walked to his communication console, his fingers entering codes memorized 2 decades ago and hoped never to use again. I'm sending a message to Earth. To United Earth Command. What kind of message? Yuna asked, though she already suspected. Taiho finished typing and pressed send. Then he turned back to the window and watched the last light fade from the sky, the kind that brings the thunder. 12 light-years distant, deep in the heart of human space, Admiral Ju sat in her quarters aboard the Yui Indomitable, eating dinner when her personal console beeped. At 51 years old, with black hair cut precisely short and eyes that seemed never to blink, she commanded the First Fleet. 7 years of unbroken victory, of never accepting defeat as possibility. She read the message twice. 3 words and a set of coordinates. Protocol Aegis. New Bison. She stood immediately, walked to her door, and pressed the intercom. Captain Doyen. Report to my quarters immediately. 2 minutes later, her executive officer arrived. Don Doyen was 40 years old, tall and radiating the calm confidence of a man who had once defused bombs for a living before joining the fleet. When Ju handed him her datapad, his face went pale. New Bison is a civilian colony, he breathed. Who would threaten a civilian colony? Who would be foolish enough? The Valoran Dominion, Ju replied. According to Ambassador Taiho, they've given us 72 hours to surrender or face destruction. Doyen's jaw tightened. What are your orders? Ju walked to her window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. For 60 years, humanity had prepared in secret. Hidden shipyards and asteroid belts. Secret bases in dead systems. Weapons that could crack planets. Shields that could stop stars. All of it concealed. All of it waiting. Send mobilization order to all fleet elements, she said, her voice cold and hard as steel wrapped in ice. Every ship. Every fighter. Every soldier. I want the full Armada assembled at Rally Point 7 within 48 hours. Admiral, that's over 800 ships. I know exactly how many ships it is, Captain. Ju turned to face him, and her eyes burned with a fury that made him step back. The Valorans think one ship is enough. They think we'll negotiate. They think we'll beg. She picked up a photograph from her desk, a young woman with a bright smile, standing in a garden on a world that no longer existed. A world the Qatari had burned 40 years ago. They're wrong. They're very, very wrong. And across 17 star systems, human warships began to wake from their secret slumber. The message traveled through relay stations hidden in empty space, past dead moons and forgotten asteroids, reaching every corner of human territory. 3 words that every officer in United Earth Navy had trained for but hoped never to receive. Protocol Aegis. Mobilize immediately. On Mining Station Hammer 6, in an asteroid belt, Captain Miho was playing cards when his communicator buzzed. Within 10 minutes, his destroyer was breaking orbit, and massive doors hidden in rocks that had looked dead for decades began to open. Vessels emerged one after another, shaking off dust accumulated over years of concealment. These were the Hidden Fleet, battleships with hulls painted black, carriers filled with fighters, dreadnoughts so immense they bent space around them. Admiral Ju watched the reports flood in from her command throne. Each green dot on her tactical display represented a ship answering the call. The numbers climb higher and higher. Admiral, current count is 612 vessels, Captain Doyen reported. His face carried something between shock and awe. More still arriving. What about the Warong Division? They're requesting deployment. All 12 special operations teams. Ju nodded. The Warong were the finest soldiers humanity had ever produced, trained in conditions that would kill ordinary humans. They could fight in zero gravity, in toxic atmospheres, in the burning hearts of enemy ships. If the fleet was the hammer, the Warong were the blade. Tell them they'll have their chance, she said. In the fighter bay of the carrier Gwangad, Wing Commander Sujin gathered her pilots around her. At 35, bearing scars on her hands from training accidents years past, she had flown 200 combat missions against pirates and raiders. This would be different. This would be real war. Listen up, she said. Her voice was calm and steady, the voice of someone who had trained for this single moment their entire career. You've prepared for this your whole lives. The enemy thinks we're weak. The enemy thinks we're afraid. Tomorrow, we show them exactly how wrong they are. One of her younger pilots, a woman named Hannah, raised her hand. Commander, how many enemy ships are we facing? Intel says 40. And how many ships do we have? Sujin smiled, and it was not kind. Enough. While the human fleet gathered its strength, the Valoran Dominion waited with growing impatience. Overseer Maltic had sent his ultimatum 40 hours ago, and still the humans had not responded. This annoyed him profoundly. Most species surrendered within the first day. Some begged for mercy. A few attempted negotiation, offering resources and slaves for their lives. But the humans said nothing. His second-in-command, a younger Valoran named Tezsik, approached with a report. Overseer, our sensors are detecting unusual energy signatures in the outer system. Ignore it, Maltic waved dismissively. These primitives don't possess anything that could threaten us. They're probably evacuating their leaders. But something troubled Tezsik. He had studied humans more carefully than his overseer, had read decades of spy reports. Humans were not like other young species. They had united their entire planet centuries ago. They built faster ships than should be possible. They developed weapons no one else had imagined. And they remembered, that was the strangest thing. They remembered everything. 40 years ago, the Qatari Empire had attacked human colonies without warning, burning 3 worlds and killing millions. 2 years later, the Qatari Empire no longer existed. The humans had destroyed it completely, not conquered but destroyed. They had broken the fleet, invaded the home world, torn down every symbol of Qatari power. Then they had gone quiet. For 60 years, they had stayed within their borders, building and preparing. Preparing for what? Tezsik looked at the sensor readings again. Those energy signatures bothered him. Too regular to be natural. Too organized. Overseer, perhaps we should request reinforcements. Maltic laughed, his scales turning bright yellow. Reinforcements against these creatures? They have no fleet, Tezsik. Our spies have confirmed it. A few dozen patrol ships. Nothing more. But sir, the energy signatures. Stop worrying. and prepare for the surrender ceremony. I want everything perfect when these humans kneel before us. Tez-Sik bowed and said nothing, but he did not delete the sensor data. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. And far away, hidden behind a gas giant in the outer system, Admiral Ju reviewed her final fleet count. 847 warships, 43 carrier groups, 12,000 fighters, 200,000 soldiers ready for boarding operations. Fleet status, she asked. All ships report ready, Captain Doyen replied. Navigation jump coordinates locked. We can be in orbit around New Bison in 17 minutes. Ju leaned back in her command throne. In 28 hours, the Valoran deadline would expire. They expected humans to surrender. They expected fear and begging and submission. Send final confirmation to all fleet elements, she ordered. We jump in 6 hours. And someone tell the Valorans that 72 hours is about to become very, very short. The storm was gathering, and soon it would break. On the surface of New Bison, the people waited, trying to stay calm, trying to trust their government. But it was hard when an alien warship hung in the sky like a silver knife ready to fall. Governor Yunji, a former Marine with 20 years of service, walked through the capital city trying to show courage she didn't feel. 400,000 lives depended on what happened in the next few hours. She found Ambassador Taiho in the conference room, sitting at a long table with a cup of tea, looking as calm as if this were an ordinary day. Ambassador, Yunji said, the people are frightened. They need to know what's happening. What's happening is that we're waiting, Taiho replied calmly. Waiting for what? We have less than 20 hours left. If we don't surrender, they'll kill us all. One ship has enough weapons to destroy every city on this planet. Taiho took a slow sip of his tea. Governor, do you trust the United Earth Navy? Of course, but what can they do? Even if they sent help, they couldn't get here in time. The Valorans have 40 ships in nearby systems. If we fight back... Taiho smiled a strange smile full of secrets. Sit down, Governor. Let me tell you a story. 60 years ago, the Qatari Empire attacked humanity without warning. They burned 3 worlds. Millions died. My wife was among them. After that war, humanity made a promise. Never again would we be caught weak. Never again would we watch helplessly while our people died. So we built quietly, secretly, for 60 years. We built the greatest military force this galaxy has ever seen. Yunji felt ice run down her spine. What are you saying? I'm saying that help is already here. They're just waiting for the right moment. In orbit, Overseer Maltic was losing patience. The deadline was approaching, and still the humans had not responded. He had expected tears and promises, desperate offers of surrender. Instead, nothing but silence. Contact their government again, he ordered. Tell them they have 1 hour to surrender, or we begin the bombardment. Seconds later, a response came back. It was not what anyone expected. The response was a single image showing a human hand making a gesture with one finger raised. Maltic did not understand the meaning, but the insulting intention was unmistakable. His scales turned dark red with rage. Prepare the weapons. These creatures have chosen death. Overseer. Tez-Sik shouted from the sensor station. Multiple energy signatures appearing in the outer system. What kind of signatures? Jump portals. Hundreds of them. Maltic rushed to the sensor display. What he saw there made his blood turn to ice. The void was tearing open, not in one place, not in 10 places, but in hundreds of places simultaneously. Points of light appeared in the darkness, growing into swirling circles of energy. And from those circles, ships emerged. Human ships. They came in perfect formations, wave after wave. Destroyers and cruisers and battleships and carriers coming in numbers that should have been impossible. Count them, Maltic whispered. Count them now. Tez-Sik's hands shook as he worked the sensors. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. 847 combat vessels. 43 carrier groups. Fighter launches detected from all carriers. I count 12,000 individual fighter craft. Maltic stared at the display, his scales turning completely white with terror. That's impossible. Our intelligence said they had no fleet. Our spies were wrong, Tez-Sik said quietly. Very, very wrong. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Ju stood before the main view screen and watched the Valoran ship grow larger. A beautiful silver fish swimming alone in an ocean of black. A silver fish surrounded by sharks. Open a channel, she commanded. All frequencies. She straightened her uniform and spoke in a voice that carried across the void like thunder. Valoran vessel, this is Admiral Ju of the United Earth Navy. You have threatened human civilians. You have threatened our children, our families, our future. You expected us to negotiate. You expected us to surrender. You were wrong. The tactical display showed their single ship surrounded by a sea of red enemy signatures. 800 warships. 12,000 fighters. Weapons charging on every vessel. You have 60 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender unconditionally, Ju continued. This is not a negotiation. This is not a discussion. This is the only warning you will receive. If you do not comply, we will destroy you. If you try to run, we will catch you. If you try to fight, you will die. Maltic's voice came back as a croak. This is Overseer Maltic of the Valoran Dominion. You cannot threaten us. We have 40 ships in nearby systems. If you attack us, your empire will do nothing. Ju cut him off. Because if your empire sends those 40 ships, I will destroy them too. And then I will come for your home world. Is that what you want, Overseer? Do you want to be the reason your entire species dies? Complete. Absolute silence. On New Bison, the people looked up at the sky. They could see lights appearing among the stars, hundreds of lights surrounding the silver alien ship like wolves surrounding a wounded deer. Governor Yunji stood beside Ambassador Taiho, watching through a telescope. My God, she breathed. How many ships is that? Enough, Taiho said simply. He lifted his cup of tea in a small toast to the sky. Welcome to the real humanity, Overseer. We hope you survive the experience. Overseer Maltic had 60 seconds to surrender. He wasted 50 of them staring at his tactical display in disbelief. His mind could not accept what his eyes were showing him. 800 enemy ships, 12,000 fighters, weapons glowing with deadly light, all pointed at his single vessel. He had been an overseer for 200 years. He had conquered 12 worlds. He had never lost a battle, never faced an enemy that could challenge him. The Dominion was the greatest power in this sector. And now, for the first time in his long life, Maltic felt fear. Overseer, Tez 6 said urgently. We must surrender. There is no shame in. No. The word came out before Maltic could stop it. Pride spoke where wisdom should have ruled. We are Valoran. We do not surrender to primitives. All ships in nearby systems converge on my position and charge weapons. We will show these creatures what it means to challenge the Dominion. Tez 6 closed his eyes. He knew in that moment that they were all going to die. Aboard the Indomitable, Captain Doyen watched the Valoran ship's weapons come online. He felt no surprise. He had studied alien psychology for years. Pride was the same in every species. Admiral, they're charging weapons. I see it, Ju replied, her voice calm, almost sad. Some people can only learn the hard way. All ships weapons free. Destroy them. The void exploded into light. 800 human warships fired as one. Beams of coherent energy crossed the darkness in streams of blue and white. Missiles launched by the thousands, leaving trails of fire. Railgun rounds traveled at fractions of light speed, invisible until they struck. The ship lasted 4 seconds. Its shields flared bright, then brighter, then collapsed entirely. The hull buckled under impacts from 100 different directions. Internal explosions ripped through its core. Atmosphere vented into space in clouds of freezing gas. Then it was over. Where the mighty Valoran diplomatic vessel had been, only debris remained, pieces of silver hull tumbling through the void, catching the light of distant stars. Survivor scanning, Captain Doyen reported. Detecting escape pods. Approximately 30 individuals made it off the ship. Collect them. They'll have useful information, Ju said. Status on the enemy reinforcements. 38 warships just completed their jump. They're forming up 50,000 kilometers off our starboard bow. Only 38. The overseer said he had 40. 2 of their ships suffered jump drive failures. They won't make it here for several hours. Ju allowed herself a small smile. Then we'll have to finish this quickly. Fleet new orders. Carrier groups launch all remaining fighters. Destroyer screen form protective perimeter around our carriers. Battleship divisions advance and engage. The human fleet moved with precision born from years of training. Every captain knew their role. Every crew member understood the plan. They had practiced this 1,000 times in simulation. Now they did it for real. Wing Commander Sujin led Hawk Squadron through the chaos of battle, her fighter small and fast, dodging between enemy weapons fire like a leaf in a storm. Around her, her pilots flew in perfect formation. Hawk Squadron, target the lead cruiser's engines, she commanded. Don't let them coordinate their fleet. The fighters dove toward the massive Valoran warship. Enemy interceptors rose to meet them, but human pilots were better trained and flew faster ships. Sujin's weapon spoke, and 2 interceptors became clouds of expanding gas. Direct hit on engines, Hannah reported. Target is dead in space. Good. Move to the next one. Meanwhile, the Warong Special Forces were earning their legendary reputation. Lieutenant Miho stood in the airlock of a boarding shuttle, his team of 12 wearing heavy combat armor and carrying weapons designed for ship-to-ship combat. Remember, he said over the radio, these Valorans have never faced humans in close combat. They think we're soft. They think we're weak. Let's correct that misunderstanding. The shuttle crashed through the cruiser's hull. Armored doors blew open, and the Warong poured into the enemy ship. Alarms screamed. Emergency lights painted the corridors red. The first Valoran guard that turned a corner found himself face to face with Miho. The alien was tall with silver scales and claws that could tear through steel. He had trained for decades. It did not matter. Miho moved like water, fast and smooth and deadly. His rifle spoke twice, and the guard fell. His team spread through the corridors with lethal efficiency. The Valorans on the cruiser had never seen anything like this. They were warriors, yes, but they were used to fighting enemies who feared them. Enemies who hesitated, who ran, who begged for mercy. Humans did none of these things. The Warong fought with cold precision, clearing room after room without hesitation. They did not waste ammunition. They did not show emotion. They simply advanced, unstoppable as the tide. In 10 minutes, they reached the bridge. The cruiser's captain stood surrounded by his officers, weapons raised in desperate defiance. Miho looked at him through his helmet's visor. Surrender. You've lost. The captain's scales flickered with colors Miho did not recognize. Fear probably or rage. It did not matter. We are Valoran. We do not surrender. Yes. Yes, you don't surrender. I've heard it before. Miho raised his rifle. Last chance. The captain hesitated. Around him, his officers lowered their weapons one by one. They had seen what happened to those who fought. Finally, the captain dropped his weapon. Wise choice, Miho said. Secure the bridge. This ship belongs to humanity now. The battle lasted 11 minutes in total. When it ended, 38 ships had been destroyed. 2 had surrendered after their crews mutinied against suicidal captains. None had escaped to warn the Dominion. Admiral Ju surveyed the wreckage from her command throne. The tactical display showed green friendly symbols everywhere she looked. Not a single human ship had been lost. Casualty report, she ordered. 12 wounded across the fleet, Doyen replied. No fatalities. No fatalities. 12 wounded against 40 enemy warships. Ju nodded slowly. Send a message to the Valoran Dominion. Use the codes we captured from a first ship. Make sure they receive full sensor recordings of this battle. Tell them that humanity does not negotiate with those who threaten our children. Tell them that this fleet will remain here until we have a formal peace treaty signed by their emperor. And tell them that if they send another ship within 50 light years of any human colony, I will personally lead this fleet to their home world and show them what real destruction looks like. She turned back to her captain. Make sure they understand, Doyen. Make sure the entire galaxy understands. Humanity is done hiding. Humanity is done being underestimated. From this day forward, anyone who threatens our people will face the full power of our response. Doyen saluted sharply. Yes, Admiral. I'll make sure they understand. And across the galaxy, empires that had never heard of humanity began to pay attention. The sensor recordings reached the Valoran home world in 3 days. The Emperor watched them in silence, surrounded by his advisors and generals. He saw his mighty warships torn apart like paper. He saw the human fleet stretching across the void like an endless wall of steel. He saw Overseer Maltic's ship explode in the first 4 seconds of combat. When the recording ended, no one spoke. The Emperor sat on his golden throne and stared at the blank screen for a long time. How many ships did we lose? He finally asked. 40, Your Majesty. All of them. And the humans? None destroyed. 12 injured crew members. That is all. The Emperor closed his eyes. 3,000 years. The Valoran Dominion had ruled this sector for 3,000 years. They had conquered empires, destroyed civilizations, bent entire species to their will. And now, in 11 minutes, a species they had never heard of had humiliated them completely. "Send a peace delegation," he said quietly. "Offer whatever terms they want. We will not fight these humans. Your Majesty, the people will demand revenge. Our honor. Our honor means nothing if our species is extinct." The Emperor opened his eyes, and they were full of something his advisors had never seen before. Fear. "You saw the recordings. They have 800 warships. We have 200 in our entire fleet, and their ships are faster. Their weapons are stronger, and their soldiers are—" He could not finish the sentence. He did not have words for what he had seen. "Send the delegation." On New Bison, the celebration had been going for 2 days. People danced in the streets. Families that had hidden in shelters emerged to see clear skies and single human fleet in orbit protecting them. Children waved at the stars, knowing that somewhere up there, heroes were watching over them. Governor Yunji held a ceremony on the steps of the Capitol building. Admiral Ju came down from orbit in a shuttle along with Wing Commander Sujin, Lieutenant Miho, and 100 other officers and soldiers who had fought in the battle. The crowd cheered so loud that Yunji could barely hear her own voice as she gave her speech. But it did not matter. The words were less important than the feeling of safety, the feeling of belonging to something greater than themselves. After the ceremony, Yunji found Admiral Ju standing alone, looking up at the sky. "You saved us," Yunji said. 400,000 people are alive because of you." Ju shook her head. "I did my duty. Nothing more." "It was more than duty. I saw the recordings. You could have negotiated. You could have let the Valorans take our resources in exchange for our lives. Instead, you brought 800 ships. Humanity doesn't negotiate with people who threaten children." Ju's voice was firm. "That's not something we discuss. That's not something we debate. Someone threatens our civilians, we respond. That's how it works." Yunji was quiet for a moment. "The other empires will hear about this. They'll know how strong we are now. Yes. Some of them might try to unite against us. Are you worried?" Ju turned to face her, and for the first time, Yunji saw a hint of warmth in those cold eyes. "Let me tell you something, Governor. For 60 years, humanity has been preparing for this moment. We built ships. We trained soldiers. We developed weapons. But more importantly, we learned. We learned from the Qatari massacre. We learned what happens when you're weak in a galaxy full of predators." She gestured at the sky, at the fleet hanging in orbit like a shield. "Those ships up there, they're not for conquest. They're not for glory or power. They are for protection. Every single one of them exists for one reason: to make sure that what happened 40 years ago never happens again. To make sure that no human child ever has to watch their world burn while we stand helpless. And if the other empires unite against us, then we'll build more ships." Ju smiled, and this time it was almost gentle. "Humanity doesn't give up, Governor. We don't surrender. We adapt. We grow. We overcome. That's what we do. It's what we've always done." In his office overlooking the celebration, Ambassador Taiho sat with his aide Yuna, watching the crowds below. He had a fresh cup of tea in his hands, and for the first time in weeks, he looked truly at peace. "The Valoran Emperor sent a peace delegation," Yuna reported. "They arrived an hour ago. They're willing to sign a non-aggression treaty and pay reparations for the threat against our colony." "Good. That's a start. What else?" "The Kellen Confederation and the Marsh Alliance have both requested diplomatic meetings. They want to establish formal relations with humanity." Taiho nodded slowly. "They're scared. They saw what we did to the Valorans, and now they want to make sure we're not angry at them." "Are we angry at them?" "No. We never wanted enemies. We just wanted to live in peace." He took a sip of his tea. "But peace requires strength. The galaxy respects strength. And now they know what our strength looks like." Yuna sat down across from him. She looked tired but satisfied, like someone who had finished a very long race. "Sir, can I ask you something?" "Of course. After the Qatari massacre, when we started building the fleet, did anyone really think we'd ever use it?" Taiho was quiet for a long moment. "Some of us hoped we wouldn't. Some of us hoped that we could live quietly, build our worlds, raise our families in peace. But we knew better. We knew that sooner or later, someone would test us. Someone would look at humanity and see prey." He set down his cup and looked out at the celebration, at the dancing crowds and laughing children and bright banners flying in the wind. The Valorans were that someone. They looked at us and saw weakness. They saw a small colony on a small planet and thought they could take it with one ship. They thought we would kneel. His eyes grew distant, remembering a wife who had died decades ago. A world that had burned in alien fire. They learned differently, and now the whole galaxy knows. He stood and walked to the window, watching the sun set over a city that had almost been destroyed. Humanity doesn't kneel. Humanity doesn't beg. When someone threatens our people, we don't send diplomats. We send everything. Below him, the celebration continued. Children laughed. Families embraced. Soldiers and civilians danced together under a sky full of protective stars. And in the void beyond, the human fleet maintained its silent vigil. 800 ships, 12,000 fighters, 200,000 soldiers. The greatest armada in the history of the galaxy, standing guard over a single small world. Ready to answer the call. Ready to protect their own. Ready, as they would always be ready, to show the universe the true face of humanity. Not the face of diplomats and scientists and peaceful explorers. The face of warriors who would burn the galaxy itself to protect the people they loved. The Valorans had thought humans would negotiate. They had been wrong, and they would never, ever forget it. The message would travel across 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 stars. Humanity had returned to the galactic stage, not as supplicants or equals, but as something far more formidable. A species that had learned the price of weakness and would never pay it again. And in the darkness between the stars, other empires began to reassess everything they thought they knew about the young race from the blue planet at the edge of known space.